Come with me for a moment into a plain farmhouse in Lancaster County on an ordinary winter evening, long before any of us had ever heard the word screen. There is a wood stove ticking in the corner, a lamp turned low, and on the bare wooden floor, a small child sits, entirely lost in play. In her lap is a doll her grandmother sewed by hand. Beside her, a little brother pushes a wooden horse and wagon back and forth across the boards, making the soft clopping sound with his tongue. There is no plastic here. There are no batteries. There is nothing that lights up or beeps or asks to be charged. And yet, those two children are as happy, as busy, and as deep in their own imaginary world as any children who have ever lived. My name is Jakob Martin. I was raised Old Order Mennonite, and today I want to answer a question that people ask me more than almost any other, usually with a puzzled little frown. What on earth do your children play with? What toys have Mennonite children held in their hands all the way down through the generations? The answer is one of the most beautiful things I know about my own people. And there is one toy in particular that I will show you before we are done that stops every outsider in their tracks the first time they truly see it. But we will come to that in its own time. First, you have to understand the one idea that sits underneath every toy I am going to describe, because without it, none of it makes sense. Among the plain people, a toy was never thought of as merely something to keep a child quiet. My grandmother had a way of putting it. She said a good toy is a child's first teacher, and you had better be careful what you let it teach him. In her mind, and in the mind of our whole community, play was not the opposite of work and learning. Play was where the learning began. A child at play with the right sort of toy was practicing, without even knowing it, the very life he would one day live. So the toys we gave our children were chosen, or more often made, with that quiet purpose in mind. Not to dazzle a child, to shape one. And once you understand that, everything about a Mennonite childhood, full of simple things, begins to make a deep and lovely kind of sense. So let us begin where our toys have almost always begun, not in a store, but at the kitchen table, made by hand. For most of our history, and in many homes still today, a child's toys were made at home, out of whatever the farm and the household could spare. A mother would take scraps of worn-out clothing, too far gone to patch again, and stitch them into a soft rag doll for her daughter. In the autumn, when the corn was husked, the children would take the dried husks and fold and tie them into little cornhusk dolls and figures, a toy that cost nothing and appeared fresh every harvest. A father, sitting by the stove of an evening with his pocket knife, might whittle a small horse, or a cow, or a little dog out of a block of scrap wood, and hand it to a waiting child without a word. And I want you to feel what that meant. That toy was not bought. It was given out of someone's own hands and own time. A child who grew up among handmade toys grew up holding, quite literally, the love and the labor of the people who made them. There is a warmth in a toy like that which no factory has ever managed to copy. From those simplest handmade things, we come to the toys my people are perhaps best known for, and rightly so. The toys made of wood, Anyone who has ever visited an Amish or Mennonite community or seen the work our craftsmen sell knows the wooden toys, the horse and buggy carved and jointed, so the little horse truly pulls the little wagon, the barns, with their tiny doors that open, the wooden farm animals, the pull toys on wooden wheels, the spinning tops, the smooth blocks, the doll cradles, and the little wooden kitchens, and look closely at what those toys actually are. They are nearly all small copies of the real world that surrounded the child. A miniature barn for a child who would grow up working in a real one. A team of little horses for a boy who would one day drive a real team. A tiny stove and cradle for a girl learning, through her play, the shape of the home she would someday keep. This is an idea far older than my people, by the way. Even the ancient Greek philosophers noticed that children given little tools and little farms in their play were quietly learning the skills of the grown-up world. We simply never stop believing it. And there is one more thing about a wooden toy that matters more than all the rest. It lasts. A well-made wooden horse does not break and get thrown away. It is played with by one child, and then a younger one, and then set on a shelf, and then brought down again, 20 years later, for the next little pair of hands. I know families where the same carved wagon has been pulled across the same farmhouse floor by 3 generations of children. Think of that. A toy that becomes an heirloom, a plaything that carries the memory of a whole family inside it. And now we come to the toy I promised you, the one that stops visitors cold. Because once you have understood everything I have just said, you are finally ready to understand it. Picture a traditional plain doll, the kind our girls have cradled for generations. She is soft and simply dressed in plain clothes and a little bonnet, exactly like the women of our community. But when you lift her up and look into her face, you find that she has no face at all, no eyes, no nose, no mouth, just smooth blank cloth where a face should be. To an outsider, it can seem almost startling, even sad. But to us, it is one of the most meaningful things we hand a child. There are a few reasons given for it, passed down over the years. The oldest is rooted in the old commandment against making graven images, against carving a likeness of a human face. But the reason I was always given as a boy is gentler, and it has stayed with me my whole life. A doll with no face, they told me, teaches a child that it does not matter what a person looks like. The faceless doll cannot be pretty or plain, cannot be admired for her looks or judged for them, because she has no looks at all. She reminds a little girl, in her very hands, that we are all the same before God, and that what a person is worth was never written on their face. A child can give that blank little doll any expression she wishes in her own imagination. And so the doll teaches humility and imagination in the very same breath. I have never found anything in a toy store that could do half as much. Now, if this window into the way my people live is stirring something in you, a memory maybe, or a longing for a simpler kind of childhood, let me ask you to do one small thing before we go on. Subscribe to the channel and stay with me, because keeping these old ways alive and understanding why they worked is the whole reason I make these videos. And I would love to know down in the comments what the most treasured toy of your own childhood was. I read every one. Now let us leave the dolls and the wooden animals for a moment and step outside and into the evenings, because a Mennonite childhood was never only about the toys a child held alone, because so much of our play needed no toy at all, or only the very simplest one. Out in the schoolyard of the one-room school, at recess, children have always played the games that children everywhere once played, before the games were replaced by screens. Marbles, won and lost in the dirt with great seriousness. Jacks, a hoop rolled along with a stick. Tag and hide and seek across the farmyard. Ball games with homemade rules, and singing games where the fun was in the song and the circle of hands, and nothing needed to be bought at all. And then, when the work of the day was done and the family gathered inside, came the games around the table. Checkers, dominoes. Puzzles worked slowly over many evenings, and card games played fast and loud and full of laughter, including one lively little card game that became such a favorite in Plain and Pennsylvania Dutch homes that it is known far and wide as our game to this day. And here is the second thing I want you to truly notice, because it is easy to miss. Every bit of that play, the marbles and the singing games and the long evenings of cards and puzzles, was shared. In our large families, a toy was almost never a single child's private possession. It was passed between many hands, older children teaching younger ones, cousins and neighbors all in the same game. The play itself knit the family and the community together, and in all of it, from the youngest child's rag doll to the grandparents laughing at the card table, there was not one single thing in the whole house that ran on electricity. A whole childhood of joy, and nothing to plug in, nothing to charge, nothing that could ever run out of battery. So, what were all these toys really teaching underneath the play? That is the question that matters most, and it is the reason I wanted to show them to you at all. A handmade toy teaches a child gratitude, because he knows the hands that made it. A wooden toy that lasts for generations teaches him that good things are cared for, not thrown away. A doll with no face teaches humility and fills a child's imagination instead of emptying it. A whittled horse and an empty afternoon teach a child, maybe most important of all, how to make his own fun, how to sit contentedly with a simple thing and a quiet mind, and never once feel that he needs to be entertained from the outside. That is a kind of strength, and it lasts a lifetime. Now, I want to be honest and fair, the way my father taught me to be, because it would be easy to turn this into a complaint about the modern world, and I will not do that. The truth is simpler and a little sadder than any villain. The new toys, the loud ones, the glowing ones, the ones that do all the playing for the child while he only watches, did not take over because anyone was hiding the old ways from us. They took over because they were easy. Because it is easier to hand a restless child a bright screen than to hand him a block of wood and the empty time to imagine something out of it. And so, little by little, without ever quite deciding to, the world set down the simple toys and picked up the loud ones and traded away something it did not even notice it was losing. My people simply never made that trade. And every so often, someone visits and watches our children play for an afternoon with a rag doll and a wooden wagon and a jar of marbles, utterly content, and they grow very quiet because they recognize something they had forgotten they missed. So the next time you see a toy that lights up and sings and promises to make your child smarter, I want you to remember that faceless little doll and the carved horse pulled across 3 generations of farmhouse floors and a jar of marbles in the schoolyard dirt. None of it was fancy. None of it cost much of anything. And yet it raised, generation after generation, children who knew how to use their hands, share with their brothers and sisters, sit still with their own thoughts, and delight in the simplest things the world had to give. That, my friends, is the Mennonite way of it, if you care to call it that. We do not give a child a toy to keep him busy. We give him a toy to help make him into a person. And I will tell you, the toys were only the beginning of it. Wait until I show you what a Mennonite child's whole day looks like, from morning to night, without a single screen in it, and how, out of that simple and unhurried life, our people raise some of the calmest, most contented children you will ever meet. Because that, and not any toy, is the real treasure we are trying to hand down. So stay with me here. We have a great deal more of the old ways left to walk through together, and we are only just getting started.